Hello, back again with another tutorial for Shamballa bags. This one I'm making is the Paloma bag. I haven't actually made this one myself yet, so I'm looking forward to it. I have prepared all my pieces as I always do, and so I just wanted to go through it with you. Now I always say at the beginning of my videos how I've prepared my pattern pieces, because if you haven't watched other ones before, you're going to ask the question, what have you done to the pattern pieces? And I tend to try and answer all the questions you could possibly have so that you don't have to ask the questions. So what I do is, when for example you have a pattern piece that says to cut on the fold of fabric, what I do is I print two pieces and then I glue them together. I sort of do an extra centimetre of fabric, of paper on one piece, and the other piece I cut on the line, and then I just glue them together. And I do that with everything because it just saves having to fold fabric, because I sometimes find, depending on the fabric itself, especially if it's a thick fabric like tweed wool, when you fold the fabric and you undo it, you've sort of got an excess in the centre really. Like if I folded on this one, I would end up with a wider part of this area that I should have. So I just find it's much more reliable to do it this way. And then once I've done that and joined my pattern pieces together, I laminate them on my A3 laminator. And I use 250 micron sheets, which means each leaf is 125 microns. So together they make 250. It's a very firm result. It's lovely. And then my pattern pieces are reusable over and over and over. If the pattern piece is too big to fit in the A3 sheet, I laminate them separately, and then I just use some this plastic type medical tape to stick the patterns together when I go to cut them out. I didn't have that issue with this particular pattern. All of them fitted within the A3 sheet, laminating sheet. So that's that, and then I just cut it out. I cut right to the edge. It doesn't, a lot of people think that the laminating part is only around the edges. It laminates to the paper on both sides, so it's fused together, so you can cut right up to the line. You don't have to have any plastic edging. So that's how I prepare my pattern piece. Now for example, here we've got the magnetic snap placement. I use my hole punch, my twist punch, to punch the hole so that I can mark when it comes to it. So I leave these pattern pieces out because we need to use them again. Now with the preparation of everything, I have fused all my cotton woven fabrics that I'm using already. So for example, I've cut out my pattern pieces. This is the lining gusset that we need two pieces of, and I've interfaced it. Now I use an interfacing. I like Shapeflex SF101, but it's very expensive here in the UK, and it is actually more of a lightweight interfacing. So I buy my interfacing from a lady called Shirley of Cracker Fabrics Facebook group. I'm not sure if she ships abroad. You ladies in the UK, that's what I use. It's called Cotton Woven. But those of you overseas, maybe you can get something similar. And like I say, it's called Cotton Woven. It is just like cotton with some glue on it to fuse. It's fabulous, and it's a really good, at least medium weight, possibly medium to heavy weight. It really does give lovely results. So I've used that on all of my pieces that need interfacing. This is the pocket piece, the zip pocket piece. Sorry, this is the front pocket on the outside, then the zip pocket on the inside, and then the two main panel pieces of the lining. So that's those pieces ready. And then I have my fabric of choice that I'm using, and this is the main panel lower part, the pocket piece, and then I've done a slip pocket it's not part of the pattern, but I always like to add a slip pocket. This measures 12 inches by 8 inches, so that's a rough sort of size that I've done. And then I'm doing a slightly different strap to the pattern. The pattern calls for 50 inches by 4 inches if you're doing vinyl, or 55 inches by 4.5 inches, I think. Oh no, 55 times 4. I don't think it matters actually, thinking about it, looking at it. No, I believe it doesn't. It's the same size, so I beg your pardon. Anyway, 4 inches across, which would make one join of the strap. I like to have a slightly different strap, which I am, if you look on my YouTube channel, it tells you how to make an extendable strap. Look for that video and I show you how to make this strap. I'm not going to show you the video because it takes too long, and because I have actually done that independently, I don't need to show you. But yes, so have a look at my extendable strap tutorial. I show you exactly how to make it. So I've got my 2-inch piece of lining with my interfacing. I haven't fused it yet because I've got 2 pieces of fabric. I didn't have a long enough one. I need to join these together as I show in the tutorial that I have online, and then I'll add the interfacing. So that's the pretty fabric I'm using. And then I've got my pieces here. Now this is the flat panel pocket, and I'm actually using vinyl and my fabric rather than completely all vinyl. I'm using half and half. So I've cut the vinyl using the dashed line that shows you there to use when you're using woven fabric. Although I'm using vinyl, I'll be joining this together as if both layers were vinyl. And so that's what I've done. I've interfaced the cotton. I'll wait and see when I've done it as to whether I need to add anything inside to give it a bit of a firmer feel. I've got a feeling it's going to be okay without anything extra. But if I did, I might use Decaville Light or something like that. So that's the flat panel pieces. And the main panel flap, I'm also doing the same thing. I'm doing half and half. What I've done though, because it does say you can cut some foam or fleece, I've actually cut fleece for this. I don't want to put foam in the flap because it's too bulky. So I've put fleece on, I've cut it smaller than the pattern piece and fused it to my cotton. So that's ready to go. And again, I'll see if I think I need anything extra to give it some structure at the time. So those pieces are ready. And the flap, this is basically the lining of the flap, so that when you lift it up you'll see that. This is the main part of the flap. So I'm going to do the strap down the centre, the strip, I'm doing in this fabric, and I'm also going to do some piping down the sides of it, just something different. So I'll show you how to do that. It's nice to do something slightly different. And then we've got our vinyl. I'm using vinyl rather than cork, etc. And I've got my exterior piece, my exterior main panel front, upper part, my gusset pieces, zipper facing, and my strap. And finally the foam. This is actually a sewing foam. It's Pelon Flex Foam sewing. So I haven't cut it 3/8 of an inch smaller than the pattern piece. I've cut it to size because I will sew it in and trim the excess from the seams. So that's the gusset pieces and the main flap. The main panel pieces. So that's it, everything prepared. And now we'll be going to start the tutorial, so I shall be back next with the start. I've just popped back before we begin because I forgot to talk about the hardware and other items I'm using. So just to let you know about the adhesives I use Gusset HT2 textile glue. It's fabulous, it's really lovely, so I use that all the time. That's my go-to glue. And I also use double-sided tape, which if you've watched my videos you know I use in bucket loads. So I buy 50-metre rolls and it's 4mm wide, and this particular one I get in the UK from a lady called Anne, and her Facebook group is Bag Kits and Glitzy Bits. So I will put links to both Shirley's and Anne's groups on my page, as well as links to the pattern, etc. And links to my groups and Shamballa Bags group. So there will be all the links to the different Facebook groups. So if you're on Facebook, it's worth joining. But I buy this, it's around £8 to £10. I don't want to fix it down to a definite price because it does depend on how much she pays for it. So this is actually from Germany, and it's called Style Fix. It's fabulous, doesn't gum up your needles, so it's worth getting. So they're the adhesives I use, and you can use masking tape. I think in places it says it's optional. And then on to the other items. I've obviously got my 8-inch zip that I've added my own zip pull to. I've got my Bags of Love by Diane label, which I will be fixing on above the zip pocket. The handmade label that I like to put on the outside. The thumb lock or press lock or tuck lock, there's different names for it, but I call it a thumb lock mainly, for your bag. You don't have to use this. If you want to use a different type closure, you can do. You'll just have to do a hack on it and fix the lock you use however you want to use it. But if not, then I've got one of them. Now it says to use grommets. Now I've got these grommets, which I have used so many times, but I have found that when I'm using it to pull on something, they pop open and they drive me crazy. So I'm not very keen on relying on these on my bags, and so I choose to use the more expensive grommet. And yeah, they are pricey, but they're lovely. They look really nice. And these are 1 centimetre grommets, so that, or 3/8 of an inch, which is the size of the hole. So I've got 4 of them. I've got my 2.5 centimetre 1-inch slider. The same with the clasps. And then I've got magnetic snaps for the 2 pockets. Now I'm actually using 15mm thin magnetic snaps for a change. I normally use 18, but because the pocket flaps are small, I just thought it'd be nice to use a smaller flap. Also my bag feet, this is optional. I'm choosing to use screw feet. I think they're really pretty. I love using these. And then the piping, I'm doing piping either side of the strip that goes down the panel, and I'm using 4mm cord. I think the sort of average size is 3mm, but I like to use the slightly larger size. And finally, rivets, lots of rivets. I use 9mm shafts with 9mm heads. So that's it, everything covered. So now we have covered everything, I'm going to move on to the tutorial. The first thing we need to do is make the exterior pockets. So we've got the upper main panel front upper part to the main front lower part, and we have the widest part of this piece where it sprays out, and we stitch at 1/4 inch seam allowance, which we do throughout unless otherwise stated. And then we open it up, and leaving the seam allowance going down, we just top stitch on the bottom side. Now it's time to add the magnets to the pocket contrast piece, which is the one with the shape to it and on the top. And because I've used dark fabric, I'm turning it over where I've got my white interfacing, just to mark where the magnetic snaps need to be. I've punched a hole, as I said earlier, in my pattern piece, and I just mark the dots like so, and then I get a washer and I put the whole of the washer in the middle bit over the dot like so, and then just mark lines either side. And do it on both sides. Like so. And then you can use your seam ripper, or I like to use my craft knife to just put the holes in the fabric for the prongs of the magnetic snap to go through. My fingers are up here, they're well out of the way, so I'm not in any danger of stabbing myself. We'll do it on both sides. And then we need to add the female part of the snap. And the way to remember the female and the male part is that the male part has the protruding bit at the top, and the female part goes inwards. So, as I said, we need to add the female part. Oh, and I just remembered, I like to add some fray block. This is June Taylor's fray block, where the holes are, to stop the fabric from fraying. That'll dry nicely and the fabric won't fray. You don't have to do it, but I like to as a just in case. So we push the prongs through, put the washer on, don't forget the washer, and then I like to fold my prongs outwards. Some people fold inwards, some people fold out. Entirely up to you. And I get my other female one. Again. And the washer. And then the other thing I like to do is just use some Peltex that I've got left over from a previous bag, the offcuts, and I like to fuse it down. Now obviously this does have a fusible side, so you can iron it around the outside, which I will do before we proceed. So I've added the snaps, and that's the Peltex attached. You can use the glue if you want to glue it on. And we get the lining of the pocket piece now, and we're going to attach it along the top, again at an 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And now we need to turn it over, and I'm just going to check to see if it needs, the seams need to be snipped at all. No, it doesn't. It sits actually quite nicely. So you can either finger press it or press it with your iron. I'm going to press that and come back. Okay, I've pressed it to give it a nice crisp edge. You may prefer to do that also. And now we need to top stitch. So there we have it top stitched, and now we get our previous piece that we've prepared, and we need to just baste these together. And you do this using 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Just lengthen my stitches. So there we have it, basted together. I should have mentioned as well to make sure that the distance between this top to there is equal on each side. Thankfully mine was, and that was more luck than judgment because I forgot to measure. But I've got a 3.5 inch distance at the top and the same there. So just make sure that you do have, before you stitch, I'll put a note up to say to measure. Anyway, now we're going to do the stitching down the centre to divide the pockets. And what I did was I got my ruler and I just measured from one side to the other to get my half measurement. And I measured 13 inches, so I did a line at 6.5. I went down further, which measured 14.5 inches, so I did 7.25, and then I drew the line. So we're going to stitch that now. And then just stitch either side, so you end up with 3 lines. So I don't know if you'll see it or not, but there's the 3 lines. I did just a couple of millimeters next to each of the center lines. And then what we need to do is just reinforce that area with a rivet. But before I attach the rivet, I'm actually going to baste my foam onto the pattern, because the rivet will actually act as an anchor for the foam, which is handy. So again, we're just base stitching it at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Checking that it's all lined, because it's a bit slanted at the top. It's just where I've not cut it that evenly. So it's going all the way around. I haven't quite caught it at the bottom, but that's not the end of the world. As long as the sides are caught in, that's the important thing. It will actually make it easier for removing from the seams later on. So we've got the foam in place, and I never fuse my foam. I always sew it in. It's up to you whether you fuse it, but I've had disastrous results, and I've read many people that have had disastrous results where the foam has wrinkled on the fabric and you cannot get it out once it's done that. So I'm going to go and punch a hole with my twist punch and place the rivet, which I won't show you because I know you've probably seen it done 100 times or a million times. So I shall be back when that's done. Okay, so I've added the rivet, and we just need to base stitch the foam onto the back panel, the main back panel. I'm just going to attach this at the sides like the other pieces, because it will make life a lot easier for removing or trimming the seams. So that's that piece done, and now we need to make the flaps. Now, if we were doing all vinyl, then what we need to do is, first of all, on the underside, we need it to add the male magnetic snaps, and that's the parts with the bit protruding in the centre. So I did as before, and I put Peltex there. So I've attached them. Now, if it was vinyl, I would glue the two sides together like so, and then once I glued them and they dried, I would top stitch all the way around. If the vinyl was quite thin and flimsy, I would put something like Decaville Light or whatever I choose. You can put what you choose to in the inside to give the flap a firmer feel. I haven't decided yet what I'm going to do, because I'm going to put the flaps together stitch the sides together, and then see how they feel as to whether I think it does need an extra something inside, and then I'll decide. So we need to put them right sides together. I'm just turning my stitches back down, and a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, stitch the round and leave the top unstitched. And if you're not confident about stitching around the curve, what you can do is draw a line with your pen to follow. So I've stitched round, and I'll do the same with the other, and then I'm going to turn them right side out. What we need to do is clip the curves for turning. I thought I would actually show you how I clipped the corners rather than just telling you, because you might just do lines where you really need to do triangle shapes, because the vinyl is quite bulky when you turn it, and just lines, it wouldn't work right. It's hard to explain what I mean, but if I show you in there, I don't know if this is coming out or not. Trying to see if I don't know if you can see in there if it's coming out or not on the camera, but they're folded quite nicely, meeting each other where the triangle cuts were, rather than bunching up. So anyway, I hope you can see that. I can't see if you can. And then what we need to do is top stitch around the edge. So that's one top stitched, and then I'm going to do the other and I will return. Okay, so I top stitched around both of them. Now the way we have to add this onto the bag is by stitching it like that, and then it will just fold over. We're not stitching the top to stitch it down, which means the raw edge will be left open. Now I could have preempted that by doing a longer seam. I could have done the pocket, the woven part longer, so I could have tucked it in and stitched down. However, because I didn't read the pattern first, I have another alternative way, and that is to cut a strip 3/8 of an inch high and as long as the flap, and I'm going to glue it down, and therefore it will hide the raw edge and stop it fraying, and we'll stitch this to the bag and that will be fine, and that will cover it. So that's my get out. I love solving issues, as I've always said, never a problem, only a solution, and that's my solution. So if you've done woven, do it exactly that, and that will look fine. Okay, now we need to mark 5/8 of an inch in from the edge on both sides, and I've placed some double-sided tape along the very, very bottom of the pocket, and we need to fit that and sit it flush against the pocket next to the line that we've marked. Like so. And now I'm going to stitch twice along this black band that I've created. I am sorry, I actually I don't know why, but I went off and sewed it without showing you. So anyway, I've sewn it top and bottom, as you can see. I don't know what I was thinking, but yeah, so there we go. And if we fold the pockets down, and by the way, I didn't add any Decoville light or anything like that into the pocket flaps because I don't want them to be too stiff. They're sitting very nicely like that. So I'm pleased with the results. Right, something else we need to do, and that is put the female part of the thumb lock onto the bag, and we just insert it just below the rivet. Now I need to take into account that I have that distance there, so I need to add the hole for the prong about 1/8 of an inch below. So I'm going to go actually 1/4 of an inch and cut through. And then I just need to have a look at where I need to put the second one. I've got to find the hole that I've done now. Right, there's the hole. Just push it through. Yep. And lift that up. And that's where I need to mark for the, or cut through for the second prong. And as I did before, I just add some fray check or fray block. This one's fray block with June Taylor. And then insert into the holes. There we go. And I've just thought I didn't have a washer with my thumb lock, so I shall pinch one. I must have come and I've just forgotten that it could be one of these. I reckon that's it actually. I did wonder last week when I saw that what it was for. So there we have it. Push them down, and again get some Peltex, and this time I'm going to glue it because it's the washer's just too big. It wouldn't iron on. Go, quite a bit of glue, and this is only so you don't feel it through the lining of the bag. So that's that. And I would also add my handmade label, but I don't want to add it at the bottom because of the pockets. So I'd be more inclined to add it at the top. But because we'll have the flap that comes over, that will get hidden. I put it on the flap, but I don't want to. So on this occasion, I'm actually not going to add the label. I don't always have to. And on this occasion, I'm not going to, because it just wouldn't be right. So put that aside. And now we need to make the flap. Okay, I made my flap. I filmed me doing it to show you, and I ran into some problems. Firstly, I wasn't happy with how this was sitting. It was just seemed to be a bit warped. So in my wisdom, I thought I would turn it back to inside out, add a layer of heat and bond light, and then fuse the two layers together, which worked perfectly. They fused together, this fitted flat, it looked lovely. And then I turned it over and I discovered I'd ironed a crease in the vinyl, completely ruining it. There's no saving this, so I was pretty disappointed. However, I do think things happen for a reason. I wasn't happy with the bulk of the piping. This vinyl is very thick and it just left such a high pile on top, and it was quite stiff, which meant the flap isn't going to sit very nicely, and it was so bulky the seam didn't turn properly. So I wasn't very happy with it. So I just think that happened because it needed to. So out goes that one. Thankfully, I literally that's the last part of my fabric. So I just had enough to cut another piece for the flap and another piece for the strip, which I'm not adding piping to. I will say, just because of the way the flap is added on at the end, you don't seal the ends, so I've done the strip and the flap piece 1 centimetre higher than it needs to be on the woven pieces, and I'll show you why when I come to do it. So I'm going to start again and show you how to do this flap. Right, the first thing we need to do is to prepare the strip. So I've drawn a line along the centre vertically, and I'm now, horizontally. If you're looking like that, it's vertical. If you look like that, it's horizontal. So and I've put double-sided tape each side of the line, and we just fold it, the sides in to meet the line in the centre, and we fold both sides into the middle. So we're left with a 1 inch wide strip, and then I want to add some more double-sided tape to attach it to the flat piece, the vinyl, the top piece of vinyl. I'm not going quite to the very top because I've got the overhang to consider. Now this vinyl's not brilliant at sticking this to. It doesn't behave very well, so it's a matte texture and it just doesn't seem to like to hang on to double-sided tape. So we'll see how we get on. I may have to end up gluing this strip in place. Oh, there's a bit of music playing. So what I've done is I've marked the centre point of the flap, both top and bottom, and then 1/2 inch either side. And I'm going to start at the bottom. And then go up to the top, like so. And I think it's going to behave long enough for me to sew it in place. I'm just going to check. I think it might be an optical illusion, but I want to check that it's actually straight and hasn't gone skew in the middle. So 4 3/4 inch. Oh yeah, it's an optical illusion. I thought it had curved a bit. Great. So that's the strip added. And now I'm going to sew these two together, right sides together. I'm going to clip these together in places and then I'll return. Right, we're going to stitch round at 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I just roughly drew a line going around the curve because sometimes it's easy to lose sight of that. So I just do that just to aid a neat stitch. But I do pay attention to that more, the edge here. So we've stitched all the way around. I've got the overhang as I mentioned, and we just need to clip around the edges now to reduce the bulk when we turn. And rather than just doing a simple line, I do the V shape notch. like so. I go near to the stitching, but not obviously too close that I could clip the stitching. I'm going to do that wherever the curves are, and I'm going to turn it right side out and come back. Okay, so I've turned it right side out, and now I'm going to top stitch around the edge. Okay, let's see how we did. So I've stitched around and I'm happy with that, and just snip the thread. And what I want to do now is just tuck these ends over. This is to get rid of the raw ends that I was talking about. I'm going to do it. I'm going to use double-sided tape in a second. I just wanted to show you that that's what I want to do, just to give it a neater finish, and that's why I did the extra fabric at the top. I shall come back in a second and show you. Okay, so to get rid of the exposed ends, I folded the edge over, and that gives a very nice neat finish if you use woven fabrics. And now we need to add this to our panel piece. Okay, so I've got my main pattern piece. I measured the width of the flap, which was 9 3/4 inches, and the width of this is 12 inches. So I marked 1 1/8 of an inch in from each side, and then measured 2.5 inches down from the top. I've put some double-sided tape along the top of the lining side of the flap, and now we need to lay this in place. Like so. And then we stitch across the top. Oh, I'm sorry, kicked the camera. So I've stitched it in place, and as you can see, we've got a nice neat top, no raw fabric hanging over. And I didn't add any Decoville or anything because we want a soft floppy flap so that it doesn't stick out like so. So that's that done, and the next part is adding or working on the gusset. I'm just trimming the stitches, so I will return with the gusset. Before I do the gusset, I just remembered to add the male part of the thumb lock. So what I've done is I've pushed this on, but it's not screwed in place yet. And what I need to do is just mark with the chalk, making an awful mess. Pull away, and I'm going to use my twist punch, screw punch, to just punch some very small holes which will help the screws go into this. Okay, so I've added the thumb lock, and I didn't put the holes all the way through. I did them about halfway down so that the screws had some fabric to screw into as it went in. So that's the lock added. The other part is that we need to add some rivets either side just to anchor those corners on. Okay, so there's the rivets added to the back. It'd help if I scrolled out a bit, wouldn't it? Zoomed out a bit rather. So there we have it. And if you want to, you could have added rivets along the centre there, which can also look quite attractive. I chose not to on this occasion. Okay, now it's time to work on the gusset. You need to put them right sides together and stitch a 1/4 inch seam allowance on this end. It's a very, very small hem. So I've actually drawn a line to help me because my foot stitch is at 1/4 inch, and I can gauge 1/8 inch by the line on this machine, but I just wanted to make sure that I was exact. And also, my vinyl is very slippery. Shiny vinyl tends to sort of stick to each other, but matte vinyl is very slippery. And if I start at the beginning, it will move, even though I'm using a walking foot. So what I like to do is start about 1 centimetre down and then back stitch. So that's what I'm going to do. So, I normally use my white tape, but it's not sticking to this fabric on the back of the vinyl. It's not even sticking to either side actually. So I'm getting my Sticks 2 tape out. Now I used to use this all the time. That's it. But they changed it. They changed the packaging and they changed it. It's very gummy, and I found it was gumming my needle, so I don't tend to put it where I'm going to stitch. I am going to stitch on this, but I'm going to give this a go in the hope that it helps to stick the vinyl down. I don't really feel I have much of a choice. So if it does gum up my needle, I'll just have to replace the needle. I mean, this is fine if I use it in areas that aren't going to be sewn on. Then it's brilliant, because even this is stuck to the machine. It really is very strong. It keeps wanting to stick. So I always have trouble getting the backing off this one. So I learnt to use the tip of my scissors. I'm sorry if you're picking up the noise of my sewing machine in the background. It's on a very noisy spin. Okay, so let's open it up to get this one off. And then open it up. I should have read through the pattern first, which I normally do, and had I read this I would have actually cut them slightly longer to do 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, in all honesty. But there must be a reason for this. So, because it's very unusual to have 1/8 of a seam allowance, I don't know of any other patterns that Sammy's done, so there's a reason for it, I'm sure. I'm just using my roller to try and convince it to stay down, because it is wanting to come back up. Right, and now I'm going to stitch the seam allowance down. Lovely. And same on the other side. So there we've stitched both sides, if you can see it. I'm not sure with the dark, that's it. So that's stitched. We also have the foam based. Had I realised we needed to join it together, I would have cut one long piece. But I have literally just stitched it a very short seam allowance, and it's fine. So I'm going to baste stitch the foam together. At 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, and I'm going to start from the middle and work my way out. I'm just going to leave it there because I've got a feeling that's going to be very pointed in one area, so it might be hard to cut out of the seam. there's the foam basted to the gusset. Now we're at the point of adding the gusset to the front panel. But before I did that, I want to add bag feet to my bag. So I've made the holes. Now, depending on what bag feet, if you're adding them, I'm using the screw-in type, so I wanted to make a hole. If I was using the ones that have the flat prongs, I would have just marked slats or slots or whatever you want to call them, little holes, little lines with my craft knife. Because I'm using these, I've made the holes so that the rim on the bag foot will fit in there, so it doesn't sit too proud. But I'm not adding the feet yet because they'll just become a nuisance whilst trying to attach the gusset. And now we want to add the gusset by lining up the join of the gusset with the centre seam of the pocket. And I'll just add that with a clip, and we continue round as we go. Now, I don't know about you guys, but sewing round curves can be a bit of a pain on a machine, some machines more than others, and it can end up moving and you end up having to unpick to redo it and so on. Now I have a couple of items, a couple of tools that I use to combat that issue. And first of all, I have my micro stitch gun, and that's exactly what it's called, micro stitch. I got mine from Amazon many years ago. And it does like tiny little tags like you get in the shops that they do the bigger tags with. And it's great if you're doing thick layers, so with the foam, because they come at a uniform length, and if you've got too thin layers, still moves. So it's not ideal in that scenario. But all you do is put it through and shoot. And it's attach the layers together, and I do that on the curve going round, and as you can see, you can end up being quite accurate with matching up the edges together, and this is perfect for it. And I only use it on the curves. I don't worry about the straight because they tend to behave, and you can put them back in line if they step out of line. Now, bearing in mind, I will be cutting the foam from the seam allowance. These do come off very easily. They snip very easily. So that's that little gadget, and then once I'm on the straight, I then add the clips again, and you go all the way up, and it stops about there. The gusset does not go all the way to the top. Now with the other corner, I wanted a little corner curve, should I say. Oh, I'm throwing them away. Just want to show you there's another solution which is good if you've not got foam layers and it's thin. And I actually did learn this from another group. Obviously we all learn from others, and that is a staple gun. Now this one is a hand stapler rather than the desktop one, and the reason why I use this is you can get in closer with the edges than you can with the desktop one, which is, no, I haven't got it to hand, but then I'd have to have it on the flat and so on. So just to show you, It's a bit difficult on doing it this. I've stapled there. And just remembering that you need to staple within the seam allowance. So you can see I've stapled them, and then when I've finished stitching, I just get my staple remover and pull it out like so. So they're the two solutions I have for going round curves. I always try to use the micro stitch first because it is easier to remove afterwards, but either methods are good. So I'm going to continue clipping this round to come back and sew it. Okay, so I've clipped and micro stitched around, and before I sew I'll just check that we have equal distances on each side. So it's 2 inches from the top of the gusset to the top of the panel, and this side is the same, so that's fine, they're both even. And if you look, you'll see the seam of the gusset is matching the centre of the pockets. So this is to be stitched at 1/4 inch seam allowance also. Turn the stitches down because I had it on basting. So that's the gusset sewn on that side, and I'm just going to check that I'm happy that I have caught all the layers in, which I have. Right, just there, I don't know if you can see, just there you can see part of the seam. I haven't caught quite that in, that's why I'm just checking. So I'm just going to, yeah, if you look there, I have slipped a tiny bit and the gusset's poking out a bit more. So I don't want to lose more of the panel than I need to, or the gusset. So I'm just going to, I use my craft knife to cut the stitches down. to where it goes off to there. And I'm just going to use my micro gun to make sure that I even okay, so now we try again. This time I'm going to go from this angle and catch the previous stitching in so it doesn't come undone. Okay, so that's got it. I mean, you could actually push the gusset out just to double check and go all the way round, checking everywhere. And I'm happy with that. And now we have to do the same with the other side. So I'm going to put the clips on and come back to you. I've clipped and micro stitched the other side now. I marked a notch in the middle of the panel, which I measured, and this is a slightly more awkward area, so I have used micro stitch on this side as well, because clips would have been too bulky. I don't know if my head's getting in the way, and I apologise if it is, but I need to see what I'm looking at. Okay. I'm just trying to make sure that the two layers match perfectly and that they don't slide apart. And I'm showing you how I stitch this so you can see how I get round the bulky and difficult areas. we just move it around bit by bit and make sure this is laying very flat. Nearly on the home straight. It's always such a relief, isn't it? Right, so I'm very happy with the way that hem is, all the seams are sitting. That's that. And I'm going to just, I can't really see, so I'm going to feel to make sure. Yeah, that's lovely. So that's that part done. The final part we have to sew is from the top of the bag down to the gusset. I'm just going to check the top. Right, I'm not happy with that. Can you see in there the gusset's poking out? So I don't need to worry about unpicking it. I'm just going to go a little bit wider nearer the gusset. See how we've done with that now. Yeah, lovely. It's got the gusset in now. So do the same on the other side. That side. Yeah, lovely. So I'm happy with both those now. So that's that part completed. And I believe now, yeah, we need to turn it the right side out. We need to clip the curves and trim any excess before we do so. I will remove the foam from the seam. So here she is. I've done the side bits and turned her right side out, and that's how she looks with the flap closed. Then open, and the same with these. I think it looks quite nice with that band as well that I put there. I'm glad I did that. And I've installed the bag feet, which were easy enough. I'm sure you all know how to do that. And now it's on to the lining. Now we're going to start with the lining. So we get one lining piece and we're going to do the zipper pocket. Now normally with the zipper facing I use vinyl, but I didn't like that look. It's bland, boring, dull, you name it. I didn't like it. Sorry, hold you there. So I thought I'd make a fabric one, which is much nicer. That's all the fabric I had left. So it's not quite as long as I would have liked it, but it's long enough. And what I've done is, I mean, this has ended up being an 1.5 by 7.5. Normally it'd probably be about 9, but it is fine. And what I've done is, I've cut the fabric larger than I needed. It was 3 inches high and 8 inches long. That's all, because that's all I had left. And then I've fused some very firm interfacing. It is Pellon Craft Fuse 808. I was twisting round to look at it. And it is quite stiff, so it gives a fairly stiff texture. And then I've folded the edges over and used double-sided tape to get the size I could. And then I've drawn a box. So this is now 1.5 inches down, and it is 7.5 inches long. So I've drawn a box in the middle that's half an inch down, and I believe 6.5 inches long. And then I've drawn the line in the centre and so on. So we've got a box that looks like that. So it's not too far different. It looks exactly how it would look like on here, only I've used the woven. So the next thing to do is to cut along the line to the tip of the V or the triangle, and then I'm going to go. Now normally you'd be saying, oh no, you've got to stitch around first, etc., and then stitch to the stitches, cut to the stitches. Yes, if I was doing it the other way I would. So this might be a bit alien for you, but trust me, it works. So I've cut it out like so. I get my double-sided tape, and I lay it along the outside edge of the box, top and bottom. And then on the side bits as well for the triangle parts. I'm sorry if this isn't in shot, I shall show you in a second. Okay, so we've got double-sided tape all the way around like so. And we begin by peeling the tape, backing off. If it wants to come off, and then fold the fabric back onto the double-sided tape, so it looks like that. And then we do the same at the top. And then on the side pieces, just an excess of double-sided tape there to remove. Fold it up. Okay, so it looks like that on the back, and turn it over and it looks like that. So I'm pleased with that. And the only other thing I'm going to do is get my June Taylor fray block and dab it on these corners. They're going to be stitched down shortly, but it helps in the long term. And now we shall proceed with the way we would normally do it. I've measured 2 inches from the top and placed the zipper facing in the centre. And if you need the instructions for the zipper facing, the written ones, they are on the Shamballa group website. And now we just need to stitch around the outside. Just one more. Okay, so that's sewn all the way around the edge. And now we need to cut the fabric out. I'm just going to take it to my board. So I've cut a line in the centre with the rotary cutter. And now we trim the fabric from the centre. There. And then we get a double-sided tape and put it on the edge . Like so. And then we get our zip . And I only ever remove one side first to line up the zip on one side. Like so. Oops. Just going to trim that stitch, and then just remove the other side . Goodness me. Oh, got it. And then lay that down. And now we get our pocket piece. And we'll put the double-sided tape along the bottom. Oops, went off a bit off there. That's it. And put the pocket like so, and we're just going to stitch along the bottom. Move the zip out of the way. So that's the bottom edge attached, and now we've stitched the raw edge, and so that's now hidden, so that won't be a problem. And then more double-sided tape at the top. And fold the pocket up. And now we stitch the side along and down. Move the zip again. And there you go, that's your woven zipper facing, which makes a nice change from the vinyl. And all we need to do now is stitch the side of the pockets. And there is our pocket made, and all I need to do now is stitch my label on that I like to do, and then we're going to make next the slip pocket, I beg your pardon, on the opposite lining, which isn't part of the pattern. I do this independently. Okay, now for our slip pocket. And this one I've chosen to do 8 inches across and 12 inches down. And we fold it in half. and I stitch at 1/4 inch seam allowance. We leave a gap for turning. And we just need to trim the corners. I'm just looking for my scissors. I hid them. And we just to reduce the bulk, and then turn it right side out. Oh, my hands aren't playing nicely today. Okay, push the corners out. I'm not needing to use my tool for this. The corners are pushing out quite nicely, she says. Okay, I'm going to take this to the iron and give it a press. Okay, what I've done is I've measured either side to get the centre point and moved 2 inches down from the top, and that's where I'm placing the slip pocket. And now we just sew, and I just triple stitch to anchor the top of the pocket. Stitching over the gap, so that's now stitched closed. So that's stitched in place. Because I didn't have a handmade label on the outside, I mean, it is clear, it's obvious that the bag's handmade, but I do like to just add these little things. So I've got some ribbon that says handmade, and I'm just going to attach it to the lining edge. So this gets sewn in when I sew the linings and the gusset together. So all I do is just put a little bit of glue on the edge and place it there and leave that bit to dry, and then continue with the bag. Now we need to join the gusset pieces together. So I've put them right sides together, and we're going to stitch at 1/4 inch seam allowance. And as we did with the exterior gusset, I'm going to add some double-sided tape either side of on the outer edge or inner edge. I'm not sure what it is actually. Anyway, on this side of the stitch line. To fold the seam back over to keep it open while we top stitch. Like so. It's a bit fiddly because it's a small seam. We'll do the same on the opposite side. And then we just need to top stitch. So that's the gusset prepared. Right, now we need to attach the gusset. I have marked the centre point for the panel, which, measuring it, it was 14.5 inches wide, so I've marked at 7.25 inches, and we just match up with the seam of the gusset. It's a bit hard to see in this darkness, and I'm going to pin it. And I've just dropped a pin which I need to make sure I find before I forget about it. Got it. Anyway, I'm going to carry on pinning all the way around and come back to you when it's ready to sew. As we did with the outer, we've attached the gusset and we attach it with the 1/4 inch seam allowance. What we need to do is leave a nice gap on this side of the lining for turning the bag. And then I need to attach the opposite side of the lining. Now, I did just film me stitching the other lining piece to the gusset and I ran out of bobbin, so I'm restarting it and continuing from where I left off. Okay, so that's that part done. Just quickly remove the pins. And now we need to stitch the top part together. Just check I'm happy with that inside. Yep, caught the seam. I just want to make sure I caught the that part in fully, which I had. There's a loose thread there, but otherwise it's fine. I've caught that label in. Yeah, I'm happy with that. I've had to come to my other machine because my main machine, which is my Janome HD9, doesn't have a removable bed. So this is quite small and it would have been a bit awkward to stitch. So I've come to my Brother Innovis NV1100, which is a beautiful machine, but she doesn't really like very thick layers, so I don't tend to use her for bag making, but she'll be okay for this because it's not too thick. So we need to stitch this at 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I've just realised I haven't threaded the needle. There you go. She's quite difficult to move under the machine as well. Goodness me. I'm definitely glad I didn't do this on the, do you know me? Oh, that thread's broken now. See, this machine does struggle to do anything that's slightly thick. Which is a bit annoying. Go back to where she snapped. And this is why I don't really use this machine for bags, because this isn't very thick, but it's still too thick for... This machine's lovely for delicate things like dressmaking. And I made sure that when I clipped this bag, I lined up the side seams. I think I forgot to mention that. Oh, getting there, getting there. On the home straight. So there we have her, and now we need to, I'll take her off and birth her. I should have said actually, before I turned her right side out, or birthed her as we say, I did trim around the top to remove the excess foam around the top, which will help with the top stitching. So do make sure you trim any foam out of the seam allowance. And I've used double-sided tape to keep the, well, I ironed it first of all, ironed the seam, and then I've used double-sided tape to put the seam together so that it stitches evenly. And I'm back at my Janome. Make sure I've caught both sides, which I have, and now we'll push the lining inside the bag, and what I'm going to do now is pin inside the bag to pin the lining down, which will help with top stitching. I'll come back and show you in a moment. I have pinned the lining down, and I don't go through the layers through to the vinyl. I just attach it to the foam, so that it helps keep this seam down, and I have it so that the vinyl is slightly coming over rather than being able to see the lining on this side. So I have to use my Janome for this because my Innovis NV1100 will not stitch through this part where the vinyl's folded. But because I don't have a free arm to stitch, I have to put my machine over the edge of the table very carefully. So it's a very awkward angle, so I can't film this part. But top stitch your bag however you do on your machine. And I shall come back when I've stitched her. So I've top stitched all the way around. So I'm happy with the results. So that's her finished, apart from adding the grommets. So we're going to do that next. I have marked where I want my grommets to go, and I've marked 3/4 of an inch in from the seam and 3/4 of an inch down. And I've got my grommet punch. I mean, you might, if you've got a manual punch, you'll have to use a manual punch with a hammer and the die. And I just want to see that that's going where I want it to go. Okay, so that's in the centre where I wanted it to be. Now, it hasn't gone all the way through. I wasn't strong enough. And hubby isn't here for me to call on. But that's okay, because now I've got the hole, I can see to cut the rest of it. There, so we've got our holes. And I've got these grommets, but we just need to punch an extra hole either side for these screws to go into. So I'm going to do that and come back to you. Okay, so I've punched little holes next to it. That's for the screws to go into. And now I'm going to add the grommets. Here she is, ready to go. I installed the grommets. I'm glad I didn't film me installing the grommets because I got quite cross. It was not easy because of the layers. I could have installed this type of grommet that you push in with the green machine or by hand and a hammer. But I find that sometimes these pop off if I've used quite a few layers like foam, etc. So I chose to go with the screw-in type, and they look nicer as well. And I thought, okay, I was going to use this clasp initially, and I realised that it would not fit through these. So I went ahead and thankfully used these huge clasps, which I think are just about the biggest I could get. I think from Emmeline bags. But even these would not fit through this type of grommet, through both of them. It only fitted through one. So luckily I had some spring rings in my supply. So I put the spring rings on. That's a mouthful. Spring rings. Well, I'll say that if you've had a couple of drinks, eh? I put the spring rings on, and that meant I could thankfully attach my strap. Now I haven't filmed doing the strap because I have a tutorial on my YouTube page. There we have it. On how to make this strap. It's a closed end strap. It's a lovely method. And I will give you the link in the description of this tutorial on how to make the strap. So there we have it. There's my bag. And I'm pleased with the outcome. And open her up. And inside And there you go. I do hope you make the bag and post pictures of her in my group. Happy stitching, everyone. Bye.